So the China economic crisis continues. And remember, this is the real estate thing where everything is connected, right? If Joe doesn't pay Bob, Bob doesn't pay Sally, Sally doesn't pay Fran, and Fran is out of luck because she still owes money to Fred, right? That kind of stuff. Let's take a look at the headlines together. China cuts the 1-year loan prime rate, but holds the 5-year steady. So why would they be doing these kind of things? So actually, first, it's probably going to disappoint Wall Street because they wanted essentially China to cut rates on everything, be it the 1 year, 5 year, or whatever. The basic gist of it is that because everyone owes money to each other, they're trying to convince banks to lend more money out and essentially pass the risk on and spread it around to everybody. But I mean, I don't want that risk. But that's essentially what the government's trying to do. They're trying to say, hey, let's all bail each other out. What's going on is that they lowered the 1 year by 0.1 percentage points. So it's currently at 3.45. And the 5 year is at 4.2. Again, it's going to probably disappoint Wall Street because they wanted cuts everywhere, not just the 1 year. Moreover, this is an interesting headline. China's property downturn spreads to trophy office buildings. The basic gist of it is their commercial real estate market's the same situation as here in the USA, or I should say there. I'm in Korea. But the basic gist is that there's just too many vacancies, not enough money to go around. People don't have enough money to rent these things out, or maybe they don't need them. There are people do work from home. Plus, you have the COVID situation where companies were closing down. Moreover, this was an interesting opinion piece. This was on Zhongzhi. The basic gist of it is that if you guys know this thing, it's like a private credit thing, or another phrase I've been using is shadow bank. And one thing I thought was really interesting about this, again, this is an opinion piece, is that there is a possibility that the Chinese government actually wants these kind of things to fail so they can take more control, because these things sort of operate outside the regular banking system. That's why they refer to it as shadow bank. And that's the thing I thought was kind of interesting. You can see here too as well, the way that this is described. It's very interesting. Read it. A lack of rank fencing appears to be the key cause of Zhonggrong's default. For instance, 30 million yuan trust nasty profit service had bought was supposed to be similar to a money market fund, which was expected to return a 5.8%. But it turned out to be a so-called, here's the phrase, cash pool. Nasty's money was put into a common pool, which the trust could use to repay older, existing investors. And if you're curious what that means, it just means it's a big Ponzi. That's essentially what it means. Moreover, this is actually interesting as well. We're getting into the politics. So evidently, President Xi may just want some of these things to fail, these shadow banking things, so he can come in and take control. Because there was this other article recently, and this is actually from China's news. Let me find it here. Yeah. This was the South, the South Morning China Post. You can read the headline: Signs of China's President Xi Jinping delegating more hand-picked deputies at the start of the third term. So basically, he's putting his underlings together, his lieutenants, whatever you want to say it, and he's giving them more control. So he's delegating more responsibility, and he's doing less public appearances, which is quite interesting. And so, and moreover, I mean, this is a really complicated thing. Because I was looking at some of this stuff as well. I want to give you guys an idea, like, look at, this is what these buildings look like. Remember, some of these are half constructed. These are like new community sort of thing. And essentially, people put a bunch of deposits in these things and then they can't move in, right? And one thing that was really interesting is that, like, how large scale this is. You're talking about 50 property developers have failed in the last 3 years, which is really a lot. I mean, just imagine if it happened in the USA, if 50 home builders are like suddenly going belly up or whatever, or not paying their bills is a better way to say it. The other way to think about this as well is, and I'm saying, where Xi wants to take control, because things are just really falling apart. So read this here, for example. China's dependence on real estate was lucrative during what seemed to be a never-ending property boom, right? If this keeps kind of going and everything's the time is going to be good forever. But it became a liability after years of excessive borrowing and overbuilding. Not a great combination, you guys can see. When China was growing faster, the excesses were papered over as developers borrowed more to pay off more debts, right? Mounting debts. So when these are going good, just borrow more, because, we know the money is going to keep coming in, but it just can't last forever, right? So then eventually you have Chinese consumers are spending less, in part because the slump in housing prices has affected their savings, much of which are tied up in property. Jobs tied to housing that were once abundant, construction, landscape, and painting, are disappearing, and the uncertainty of how far the crisis might spread is leaving companies and small businesses afraid to spend. So people are scared right now. And there was another piece here that was really interesting here. I was going to show you guys. Basically, Alibaba is firing people, because we've talked about tech companies in the USA firing people, but it's a very similar thing in China as well. So Alibaba is firing an article, and then they're also saying Tencent is firing people, and they're reluctant to hire because if you're not certain about the economic, future, you're just like, I'm not going to be hiring people. I don't need to be hiring so many. And it's the same situation where in reverse, when you think everything's rosy, you're just taking out tons of debt. So again, over borrowing, over building. Moreover, this is an interesting photo that was in one of the articles. This is the Country Garden one. And this is kind of what the models look like. And they have this too in Korea. And actually, it's funny, living here to just tell you guys how culturally it's a little bit different than the USA. You're walking on the street, say, like through a downtown area, and they'll have people handing out brochures and flyers of like, hey, invest your money. We're building this new building. It's going to be fantastic. And they kind of yank you in to the building to take a look at the model home. So what I'm saying is that the people selling you these things are very, very aggressive. Now, in Korea, we are affected by the stuff happening in China as well because money does flow around the world. And so that's why we got to keep an eye on this stuff. It is a real thing. And, moreover, I was looking at this. This was an interesting, read the headline here. China local governments to sell $206 billion of financing debt. Basically, it went through some of the second and third tier cities. I don't think the money's there, basically. And again, this relates to China's government is trying to convince like banks to lend out more money. Not only are you having failing real estate, but you may have sort of these governments in this like smaller cities like second and third tier that maybe we're expecting, property taxes or expecting, new residents to move in, et cetera. And their budgets aren't balanced either. So I think this thing could be really, really widespread. And if you want to read more about this China stuff and my experiences when I was there, I keep mentioning it, but you guys should pick up. My book just came out about a week ago called Positive Angle, and I write about my experience in China and real estate. I think you'll like it. But I mentioned that because when you live abroad, you pay attention to currency all of the time, right? So, for example, read this headline. China's central bank steps up intervention after the yuan hits a 16-year low against the greenback. And I watch this stuff all the time. So right now, the dollar to the Korean won, dollar is very, very strong. And even compared to you can see the China's yuan, the dollar is also really strong. So 16-year high, it's kind of crazy. And it's funny. Moreover, this is actually really interesting. Take a look at this. This is China. You read the headlines here. China urges BRICS to become a geopolitical rival to the G7. So one is you have China facing an economic meltdown, but two, they're also trying to form a new team, BRICS. So if you don't know, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But they may be adding more countries. So here's the rumors of what the countries that could be who could join, theoretically. Maybe Iran will join, maybe Belarus, maybe Venezuela. And then this article is contending, but I don't think anyone knows for sure, that Argentina, Saudi Arabia, or Indonesia might have the best chances of joining. So I'd love to hear your thoughts if you think there's any other countries that are being left out of this. Now, in response to China melting down, as we can see, and it's going to be on the news all week, I think there's certainly a realignment from the U.S. perspective. Now, for example, if you take a look at this headline, Elon Musk arrives in Japan, first visit in 9 years. Now, if you understand Tesla, they are heavily reliant on China, right? They get a lot of revenue from over there. There's always big headlines of what's Elon doing in China, what's going on with the Shanghai plant, et cetera. So if he's making a trip to Japan the first time in 9 years, I mean, that's a clear indication that he's thinking, you know what? I'm going to start selling cars, building cars or whatever. I want to get Japan involved. I think that's pretty easy to see. Moreover, this is actually pretty recent. You can see it's dated August 18th. Biden to sign strategic partnership deal with Vietnam in latest bid to counter China in the region. And I've said this to you guys several times. I think Vietnam and India are going to be the next sort of big growth markets. It's not going to be China anymore. That story is over. And I've been saying all along, I think USA should form closer ties with Vietnam, and it seems like that's what they're doing. So thank you, President Biden, for watching my channel. Moreover, look at this headline. Vietnam said to plan military buildup on South China Sea footholds. So if you don't know, if you're following the story, China's been building like, what's the right word to say, like an artificial island, and they've been building airships on that. We've been seeing photos from this from time to time, and I wouldn't be shocked if the USA starts basically pumping money through Vietnam to oppose China. So we'll see what goes on with that. And this is also a bunch of saber rattling, chest beating stuff to sort of project who is going to protect Taiwan. I mean, this is all related. It's all related to the region. And it's kind of interesting because as I showed you guys before, where like China's melting down, and then like Xi's trying to consolidate power and also build up his allies over there, be it domestic and abroad. USA is also shoring up more relationship with Vietnam. Like, for example, this was a recent article, and you probably will see more of this stuff of like essentially articles pumping up opportunity in Vietnam. So read the headline: Vietnam's EV ownership will see strong growth in 2023, says new report, right? See these kind of things to say, hey, look at people be buying EVs over there. And there was a recent IPO from Vietnam. It was like a EV maker. I don't know much about those. I haven't mentioned it, but I did see it. And the one thing I can tell you, though, is that when we were in Saigon, essentially the guy who owns it all, he's like a billionaire. It's Vin Group, and I think this company was like VinFast, something like that. So I think you're going to see more cooperation between U.S. and Vietnam, and probably more ties like these. I mean, you're seeing it right there already. Moreover, I've mentioned this before over the summer. This was back in May, but you can read the headline. Revive alliances bring U.S. forces back to Subic Bay in the Philippines. And we actually have members of the channel that are in the Philippines, or members who have served in the Navy and have been to Subic Bay. But there's a possibility that you may get stronger ties with the Philippines. So I think all this stuff is really interesting, because this is always the debate, right? The debate before was, China and USA will never go to war because they're dependent on each other, et cetera, right? Because we have a lot of factories over there. We depend on their consumers. They sell stuff to us, et cetera. And you've been hearing this phrase a lot lately, which is decoupling, meaning like, uncouple or break up. And when you see sort of all these things put together, right? Musk going to Japan, Biden making stronger ties with Vietnam, and maybe the U.S. Navy is going to rebuild presence in the Philippines, these kind of things. I think they're sort of planning ahead, right? They're saying, well, the money's not there anymore in China. We're time to go elsewhere. And when I see these kind of meltdowns, and I'm just telling you guys, it's been all over the news here in Korea. It's something that we knew that was kind of going on. Like they never really resolved the Evergrande thing. If you remember a couple years ago, they say, hey, Evergrande's melting down and they're defaulting. And like, okay. And then it was just like yesterday or a couple of days ago, they're like, hey, surprise, we're going bankrupt. And yeah, it's like, oh, okay. And then suddenly you get like a flood of these things. And, I think it could be a boiling over. Like you try to keep it secret for so long, but then people start making the big moves, right? The big money starts moving money around, and it's no longer able to keep it a secret. So keep an eye on all this stuff this week, but this is sort of basically the updates. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any one of these things. Do you think this China crisis is serious, or do you think it's just a bunch of hype and everything will cool down in a week and we'll forget about it? But me personally, I don't think it's going to be like that, because I think there's some deep-rooted problems with the China system, be it the overborrowing, overbuilding, and also to the shrinking of population, right? So they have some very real things that is going on over there. And then over here in USA, we're still dealing with our own problems, right? Or I keep saying I'm in Korea, you're in USA, but we keep dealing with problems of inflation. You're also going to have issues of companies that need to sell stuff, but if people in China aren't buying stuff, you got to look for other places to buy things. So that's why I think partnerships with other countries will probably be a thing. Mexico is now the USA's leading trade partner over Canada and China, and that was in the recent last few months. So I think that is definitely worth mentioning, because again, it sort of reiterates the story that where USA will be looking for partnerships elsewhere around the world. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on any one of these things. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next video.